Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this talk. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at the fair. Has everybody been to look at the works already? Yeah? Okay. So today we're going to talk about the modern and contemporary art market, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to my three panelists. But before we go into the introductions, I thought I would just run through the structure of this panel discussion and how it's going to go. So we're all going to introduce ourselves. The panelists have some information they'd like to share with you about what they do. And then we'll move into a discussion where we'll talk about some questions and some issues that have come up, over the last few years, what everyone's observations are, and hopefully these takeaways will be useful to you. We don't have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of this discussion, but everything will be recorded and available online after the fair if you'd like to refer back to the videos. We're also going to hang around for a little bit after the talk, so if you'd like to speak to any of us or you have further questions for us, that would be the avenue to get those aired and to share them with us. Okay? So without any further ado, let's get started. I'll just very quickly introduce everybody that we have here today if you don't already know us. So, sitting next to me, I have Christine Fernando. Christine is the regional representative of Phillips Auctioneers in Singapore. She joined Phillips in 2018, and she has been leading all client engagement activities in Singapore and across Southeast Asia. Next to Christine, I have Ning, who is the co-founder of Family Office for Art, or FOFA. She runs also The Culture Story, which is an art salon and gallery. FOFA provides specialized art advisory services with a focus on collection management, estate planning, and legacy building. And next to Ning, we have Valerie Lim, who is the gallery director of Artcommune Gallery, and she's worked there for the past 8 years. She has an academic background in political science and professional experience in the field of marketing. So she brings a different kind of experience to her work in the art scene. As for me, my name is Usha Chandradas. I run an art magazine. We're called Plural Art Mag. I'm also an educator, and I'm a nominated member in Parliament representing the concerns of the arts community. So that takes care of introductions. I'd like to invite our speakers now to start telling us a little bit about what they do. So our first speaker is going to be Christine.
Thank you, Usha, and thank you to C-Focus and Art and Market for having me on this panel, and to all of you, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Christine Fernando, and I'm the regional representative for Phillips, based in Singapore. I have spent the past 11 years in the auction industry. At Phillips, we have auctions across the globe in Geneva, New York, London, and Hong Kong. We have online sales, live auctions, and private sales. I'm just sharing a couple of photos today to show you some of the things that we do. These are two photos of the recent auction preview that we had in Singapore in October last year. At these previews, we bring a selection of highlights from the upcoming auctions, be it the auction in Geneva or New York or Hong Kong, to Singapore, where clients can come and see the works in person. And actually, it's open to everyone to come and see the works in person, to interact with our specialists, to learn more about art, jewels, and watches. And I chose this photo in particular because it's not very clear, but you can see two artists. On the right is a modern artist, Pierre Soulages, and on the left is Eva Juszkiewicz, a Polish contemporary artist, which sort of covers what we're going to be talking about, which is modern and contemporary artists. And the next slide would be a Phillips event that we had in 2019. I think some of you might recognize yourself in the photo. This was a collaboration that we had with furniture store in Singapore that specializes in Danish furniture. Phillips offers design furniture as one of the categories that we sell, together with art, jewels, watches, editions, and photographs. And we thought this would be a meaningful event for collectors in Singapore because it was a good opportunity to interact with our specialists and also with the furniture, to sit, to feel it, and to learn more from 1B2G, who are, I would say, one of the specialists in this category in Singapore. And next slide would be an event that we held in Jakarta. This was a private selling exhibition where we showcased international artworks at a regional art fair. It was the first time that Jakarta had a display of a selection of works by Banksy, Kaws, and we even included Thai artist Nati Utarit. So I just wanted to share these photos with you to show how we work together with collectors in the region to really grow their collections, help them experience art in different ways, and that to know that there's always opportunities to speak to the specialists to learn more about art. That's it.
Thank you so much, Christine. Okay, Valerie, your turn.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here today. So actually I've been with artcommune for some time now, and essentially we're a gallery that represents important artists in the Singapore visual art canon. So without further ado, I just want to go straight into the images. For the first one that I've prepared would be really to talk about what we've emphasized most as a gallery. We emphasize on the educational portion of it in helping collectors acquire research-based purchases. So the image that you see on the right, the image that you see on the left, right, is a story of Chong which saw its reprint in 2023. Back in 2025, when we first launched the first edition of this catalogue, right, there had been near to no gathering of works from private collections. There had been no known archival that we've found outside of art institutions. So I'm very glad that we managed to play a big part in sort of expanding the audience scope of understanding the artist a little bit more. Also with this as well, the next slide please. Yeah, so apart from organizing selling exhibitions, we also do our part in delving into collaborations with collectors as well. So for this one, it's the Kingsmead Road project, 5 Kingsmead Road. So what happened is the image that you see on the right, once again, in 2019, we had this special collaboration with the then owner of 5 Kingsmead Road, which is the very important home of Chen Wen-si, pioneer artist in Singapore. So what happened was this is a very special project to us because in many ways, this place, this particular residence, is the only residence to have gotten the historic marker under the NHB to be listed as a private historic site. So the then owner of Chen Wen-si's home had actually invited us to organize together with her. And she actually opened up the private space for works of the late artist to be exhibited over there. So actually with this as well, with the entire cultural impact that it has brought to members of the public, the current owner is very resolved into continuing the legacy. So ever since then, the image that you see on the left, the entire 5 Kingsmead Road has seen an entire architectural transformation, which also includes relocating the historic wall mural that Chen Wen-si had painted on both sides of the mural, on top on the second floor, which is now visible to public. This entire 5 Kingsmead Road project we'll see is relaunched in this coming May, so do look out for it in our upcoming channels. Thank you. Which brings me to the last question, slide. So today I also wish to highlight Wong Kin's presentation at SEA Focus 2025. I wish to bring this up because in many ways Wong Kin's practice is perhaps quite a perfect embodiment of the theme of disconnected contemporaries for this edition of SEA Focus. And also, if you think about it, for Wong Kin, a living artist that was born in the 1940s, who has lived through a time where the modern art crossed over to the contemporary in Singapore and in New York. I think his work straddles very nicely between both notions and invites a lot of conversations on us on the somewhat clear boundaries or maybe the blur boundaries that we have with regard to these two ideologies over here. So that's all for me. Apart from that, I also do wish to add that for artcommune, we work in the primary and secondary market, and we are also the primary dealer of Chung Soo Pings, apart from Christie's and Sotheby's in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ning, over to you.
Is this my first picture? Sorry. Okay. Thank you, SEA Focus, for having me. It's okay, Usha. So as per my introduction, I run the Culture Story with my dad. We started in 2017. It's a private gallery, typically actually showcasing works from the family collection. But today I will speak, this one's fine, thank you. Today I will speak wearing my hat as the founder of Family Office for Art, and we are a boutique advisory service provider, primarily looking at areas of art collection management, estate planning. So this could involve things like valuation and appraisals, helping you to get insurance, helping you to think about estate planning, working with your lawyers, and then sort of at the very top in terms of, if you think about it in the apex structure, we can also help with brand building and legacy building work. So here this picture, the picture before that, in terms of, because I was thinking of my involvement thus far in the modern and contemporary scenes, because I'm primarily not a gallerist, but when we started the Culture Story as far back as 2017, we worked very closely with Artcommune and Wong Keen for a one-off project. And this is a photo, actually, this exhibition was held here at the art space at Halutrans, where we banded together. So we pooled our resources and our collective knowledge, and we really wanted to help Wong Keen to present this exhibition that he has been working on for over 6 years, but he was too shy to present it, and that exhibition was called Flash Matters. And again, I echo what Valerie has said, which is, Wong Keen is a very senior artist. He crosses between contemporary and modern, and it's very hard to label him also, and we don't want to label him. But what we tried to do was to contemporize and maybe refresh some of the ways of presenting his work. And I think more often than not, usually after you put up an exhibition, actually there's a lot of effort behind trying to educate, trying to engage, trying to convey that story to the audience, whether you're a collector profile or not a collector profile. So I'm very glad we did this and our efforts paid off. And Usha, if you go to the next slide. So when we talk about collection management and estate planning, actually this is a picture from a project that we concluded at least a year ago, where we were engaged by a private individual to help him inventorize his estate of close to 200 classical Chinese ink artifacts, which included scroll paintings, fans, albums, loose papers, letters, etc. I should also add that we actually worked with a curator from a local institution to catalog and also to help authenticate. And the main requirement from us was that he needed to get valuation for insurance purposes. So we persuaded him to fly in a specialist from Hong Kong, because we didn't quite have this sort of expertise in Singapore where one could give current market valuation for this genre of works. And so this lady here is from a Hong Kong-based auction house. And I'm very happy to say that we concluded the project about 2 months after we started. But it was very challenging because so my job very much is to educate and to encourage the owner to think about spending some money to do something like this. Because once you get it done, all you have to do is just top up or add on incrementally. The painful part is just making a decision to do something like this. And so my job was to reassure him, and I was the turnkey service provider. We took all the high-res images and we compiled them into a proper list. So if we go to the next image, this is actually our private gallery, which I also happen to use as a photography studio where a need arises. And this is a very, very interesting collection. It's actually a family heirloom, and it's a set of 8 vintage furniture pieces that has been in the family for the last 3 generations. And the current owner, who's about my age, really wanted to document the pieces properly, do a condition report for each of the 8 pieces, and actually he was looking he's open to inquiries from institutions if they actually want to take it from him. So we have been tasked to help him bridge or open up these conversations with institutions. And I'm happy to say that there is a very serious discussion that's underway. It's been very interesting learning about his family background, history, and also the story behind these pieces. They were made in the 1920s, so they're actually close to 100 years old. So that's the work that we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, all our panelists. So we're going to dive into the discussion proper, but before we do that, I thought it would be useful to understand from our panelists what their understanding of modern and contemporary art actually is. So I don't know if you've attended the other talks under this series of events, but I think one of the earlier ones involved a more academic discussion on the dividing lines between the modern and the contemporary, and really the whole presentation that's been put together this year for C-Focus questions those definitions, right? To what extent are they even something that is important or something that is clearly well defined? So we know that the art historians have their own definitions. John Clark, for example, cites the contemporary as starting from the 70s onwards. Those of us who've worked with institutions, we might know that local institutions have adopted the 1990s as the start of the contemporary in Asia. So I thought what would be a good way for us to start off would be to ask our panelists to let us know what they think the delineations are between the modern and the contemporary. So Valerie, perhaps we could start with you.
So actually for me, right, personally speaking, we've always been, as a gallery, we've always been associated with the modern art label. But to me personally, all these isms, they actually, if you think about it, they are very much defined by time or maybe primarily by the West. And personally, I feel like it doesn't really hold true to the entire understanding and the context of local artworks or even Southeast Asian artworks for that matter. So personally, I would want to reference at the academic Kevin Chua's essay on modern art in Southeast Asia, where he did mention that if you think about maybe understanding Southeast Asian art, it is perhaps very much intertwined with us coming to deal with our colonial past, our nation building efforts, so on and so forth. So, to give very specific instances on this, perhaps I may want to talk about some of the artists under the spectrum of our representation. And the first would be Chong Ping, in which he was known as a contemporary in his time, but at the same time, in today's context, I think he would be better known as a modern artist or classified in the modern artist category. Whereas, if you really look at what Chong Ping is all about, even in his 1970s abstract work, right, you would see that they might well have been executed by someone that's living in the present day's time. Of course, we're also talking about other artists like maybe Tang Da Wu, for example, whose name is very synonymous with the contemporary art scene in Singapore. But, on closer look, one may detect several modern influences that are perhaps styled by the artist generation that preceded him as well. So I think there's all of this overlapping sort of issues that come into play when we think about modern and contemporary art. And actually for the gallery, in the perspective of our buying and selling, all we want to do is we want to highlight and emphasize on these contexts and the nuances and bring about a better understanding for collectors so that they are able to make more uniform decisions when it comes to acquiring of purchases. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ning?
This was the most difficult question to answer. But personally, my background is London, because I used to live and work and study in London. So actually, when you say modern, I'm actually thinking of the Impressionists and Impressionism, which we're talking about. This is the late 1890s, right up to the turn of the 20th century. And then the labels that I was used to seeing when I was still in London was post-war and contemporary. So actually those are the sort of markers when I sometimes even think about work. So some of the early, let's say Chong Ping works, it's modern in the local context, but sometimes I do think of it as post-war. But again, the post-war reference is very much a Western-centric perspective. I think at the end of the day, modern and contemporary, these labels or categories is really to help researchers and academics and historians to help them contextualize, practices. But as a collector, Dad and I, we sometimes collect together, but I think we're quite blind to these categories. At the end of the day, we resonate with works that, either their life story, their philosophy, their practice, and even on the selling side, I also don't really think these definitions come into play. So I'll be curious to hear what Christine has to say in this regard.
Yes, I think picking up from where both of you have spoken about modern and contemporary, so broadly speaking, I would say modern art covers art from the 1860s right up till the 1960s. And then there was no clear sort of move or shift next into contemporary art, but it typically starts from around the 1970s. Like there wasn't a clear point in which modern art became contemporary art. And similar to what Valerie said about Wong Keen, he sort of straddles between both modern and contemporary. So contemporary then would be 1970s to present day. And in the auction world, within this term of modern and contemporary, we even break it down further sometimes, like what Ning said, to post-war. And even within contemporary, you're then looking at like young contemporary compared to artists from the 1970s who would be considered older contemporary. So in terms of selling and buying, I think it is quite important to have these categories in the sense that some collectors only collect modern, some only collect contemporary, some collect a mix of both. And when you look at artists, they're oftentimes compared to their peers from the same era, from the same period. So it is important to a certain extent, but I do feel the definitions vary quite a bit from institutions. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, it sounds like the market definitions also, are something that's a little bit in flux. I think definitely the art historians amongst us will know how contested these definitions can be. But I'm also interested to interrogate a little bit further what these labels mean from a market perspective. So I don't know how many of you have heard, this sort of very common saying around in the art world that, well, modern works would be investment grade pieces. If you buy modern works, they cost more, but there's likely to be a better market for them, and they might be something that would make better long-term investments. With contemporary work, it's a little bit like going into venture capital. You're kind of taking a risk and taking a chance that this artist's career will progress. Sometimes you might find someone that will make you a lot of money, sometimes you may not. So just coming out of, things that you hear people say in the space, what would each of you have to say to that kind of framing of the modern and contemporary from a market perspective? Is that a fair kind of way to look at it, or do you have some other way that we can think about these ideas? Just from a buying and selling, profit-making perspective.
So I think with generally speaking, one would say that modern art would be sort of your safer bet because the artists, you know their entire artist trajectory, you have seen the works they've created, and you can look at their past records to know what they've been doing in the market. And then of course you have contemporary, and like I mentioned earlier, you have that sort of divide between the older contemporary and the younger contemporary. I would say that with the younger contemporary, there definitely is sort of higher risk in investing in these artists, but oftentimes you can sort of look at certain factors to decide if it's a worthwhile investment or not. For example, if it's collected by a museum, if it's in exhibition shows, if it's got publication records. So generally, I would say yes, modern art would be considered a safer bet, and contemporary art tends to be high risk at times. But research into these artists are very important before deciding what would give you good returns and what wouldn't give you good returns.
many thoughts running in my head. It's not an easy question to answer, right, in 2-3 minutes. But I think for modern art, it also depends on your appetite, your profile, your aesthetics, your, what have you been exposed to. I think with modern, if the artist is dead, then you know that the supply is finite. And if this artist has been well recognized, collected, then you would know that, you would assume, after having done some research, that most of the good works would be in institutions, which means that the number of works circulating out there in private hands is X. And then the kind of works that you might see coming into the market would be much less. For some artists, if you're lucky, they have a catalog raisonné. I think that's very, very helpful. So that's sort of like the foundation for, referencing, looking at works that have been produced, what sort of edition sizes, etc. I think also if it's a very well-known artist, you might come into a situation of forgeries. So I would say it's buyer beware. You have to do your research, because if it's like a, again, sort of well-known French, German, Swiss kind of artist, you really need to work with the right dealers, the right galleries, get second opinion, third opinion. But yes, when I used to intern at the auction houses, there was a time when we would say that, there's crazy money going after the contemporary artists, the YBAs, and actually, if you look at the impressionist or post-impressionist genre, it's such a good deal, right? And these are, iconic, stable names. I think with contemporary, the young contemporary artists, how is it defined now? Is it artists born after 1990 or after 2000?
The younger ones would be like maybe post, so 21st century, 2000 onwards, yeah.
Okay. So if it's buy and sell, yeah, again, it's very, very risky, because you never know where this young artist is going to go, right? They've literally just started on their careers. And you don't know what they're going to do. So that's like a big question mark. And also, for some of you who track the market, you would know that some of the ultra young contemporary artists, the market's really come down. It used to be like 10x. From the moment someone sold their works in the gallery, and then, they would flip it in the auction, and achieve like, staggering numbers. And I think some of that froth has come down quite a bit. But for me, in my work and through my own experiences working in the industry, I would say there's very, very few collectors who only collect modern, but most of us collect a blend of both categories. Yeah.
So I'm just going to come right out and take a left of field perspective on this, in the sense that, how should I put it? So actually, for with regard to the question, right? I feel like yeah. So actually, with regard to labels and all that thing, right? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
So
sorry.
The question was, do you have any views on this sort of common thing that we always hear in the art market, that modern art is very good as a long-term investment and something that involves a little bit more of a financial outlay, but tends to give you better returns? Whereas contemporary art purchases are more like venture capital investments. You kind of take a risk. Maybe the artist will appreciate, maybe they won't. So it depends on what you're looking for and on whether you think that the contemporary artist will be a good buy. So a little bit more risky, but cheaper, I suppose, to acquire. So this is what I think a lot of people think. So do you have any views about that kind of framing?
As a matter of fact, I feel like with regard to the investment perspective, we don't quite want to take this route, because we feel that even if they say, perhaps this is more relevant to the auction cycle of things. But in the gallery's perspective, even if you say that this is a modern artist, there are so many factors, contextual factors that come into play. We're talking about whether these works could be part of the canon. We're talking about their exhibition and the sale history. We're also talking about maybe the quality of the work, the collector base, the trend of the market at this point in time. So, I mean, for the gallery, right, to say that like artwork should be viewed in terms of a long-term investment is just one factor in a broad criteria of things in which collectors come to us when they buy art. As a matter of fact, if anything, they would tend to come with us with advice on how do you collect artworks with that possibility of value retention. So without being very speculative on the market, we would advise them on, how do you pick on your quality works? How do you pick on works that may lose the flavor of the time, but always has the enduring quality because of where the artist is standing and where the work is representative of the artist's career at that point in time.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the market that you've seen it in all of your respective capacities, right? I don't know if you've read the latest Art Basel UBS report on the state of the market, and the numbers for 2024 were not great. I think everyone saw a softening of the art market, mainly because of geopolitical conflict, interest rates, there's been a lot of uncertainty, and I think the art market has actually taken a bit of a hit because of that. So I'm wondering, in all of your respective fields, how has that sort of trickled down to us here in Singapore? Is that the same as what you've experienced? Are there any other observations that you've had about the state of the market in the last year? Valerie?
So I think recently we put out a statement to the press. We do feel that the market has been a little bit soft, but at the same time, as a gallery, we're not in there for the short term, we're in there for the long term. And we do see some sort of enduring sort of traits in the market that we wish to concentrate on. End of the day, I feel like maybe this boils down to a somewhat related topic. I feel like collectors have become even more discerning, if anything, which means that they know their stuff, they have all the information, they have alternative information sources. And, on the perspective of galleries or even dealers for that matter, it is the onus is on us to be able to give them that information that they need to be able to make that decisive decision.
Ning, what do you think the state of the market is like?
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident, but I was kind of mulling over your last question, and sorry to bring it up, but actually maybe from a purely investment potential, I might recommend going with the contemporary, but it also depends on your horizon, your investment horizon, right? If you want to flip quickly, then you have to look at a certain category of artists. And I was reading a report a few weeks ago, and say a name like Yayoi Kusama, she's not an overnight success. In fact, I think this platform was tracking her sales results and also her exhibition history. She's on average, someone like her, women artists, have to exhibit more than her male counterpart. And it's something like 110 exhibitions per year, at least for the last 8 years. So if you wanted to take a punt and take a chance on a young artist, you got to wait out at least 10 years, 15 years to see where they go. And if you don't have that kind of outlook, then you might want to go with something a little bit more stable, where I think if you buy modern, you won't lose your principal, I think. It depends where you bought it from, right? Auction, private sales, is it a distressed sale? And I'm glad you're not asking us about tokens. Very hard to answer that question.
If we have time, we'll come to those.
If we have time. But now going back to your current question, I think market is... honestly, it is very soft, I feel. And this is like the second year in a row. But now after the Trump inauguration, maybe markets will rally and people feel better and sentiment is lifted. So we might see a bit of an uptick, at least locally. And I would say if you look at Southeast Asia, every market is very different. Christine would probably be able to share some anecdotes. So I mean, I'm very encouraged that there are more galleries also in Singapore, and each of them bring different programming, different sort of content. And I think platforms like these, like the one in C Focus, educating, introducing, explaining, giving access, will only help to propel our market forward in the long term.
I think picking up from where Ning mentioned about the contemporary artists and waiting long term, definitely I would say long term, of course, holding works for longer term is a better route. But at the same time, even with contemporary artists, no one is assured of where their value is going to go in the long term, right? The artist could change their style completely, could ruin their relationship with the gallery, and people will stop collecting. So contemporary, sometimes you do have, it is not a assured way of sort of ensuring that you will have return on investment on that. In terms of like the market, how it's been doing in the last few years, definitely it has softened quite a lot in 2024. 2022, 2021 especially, we saw a spike in the market, especially with people buying contemporary artworks and really speculating on these artists and paying astronomical prices for these works. And last year, there were all of these artists that were, selling for much higher at auction did not achieve the same prices that they did 2021, 2022. So I feel collectors now are taking a more thought out approach, really collecting blue chip works, or even if it's collecting top quality works from an artist, and being selective of what they collect rather than following trends and collecting what the market is dictating. In Southeast Asia, and how it applies to us, there has been a drop in art market sales, or even in terms of how people have been buying art. And a lot of people who were primarily collecting Southeast Asian art also have moved on to collecting international artists. So that in itself is a shift. And in terms of Southeast Asian art, I think recently Sotheby's had an auction in Singapore, and that would sort of give you a good indication of how the Southeast Asian art market is doing. So there were great lots that sold for high prices, and then there were also some that didn't sell. So from there, I can say that collectors are really being selective, being careful in how they invest, in how they choose works to buy.
So I think given the state of the market being what it is, what do you think the opportunities are now to grow it? I think you've all alluded to some common ideas: better education for collectors, more galleries sort of coming up to represent different artists. I think the education point looks at creating demand, which of course is really important. More galleries coming up, and I suppose it's a question of creating more supply than what the market can handle. One thing that I've been hearing a lot about personally when I've been talking to people is the lack of a strong secondary market in Singapore. So what a lot of newer collectors or even more established collectors tell me is that, you buy a work, okay, you hang it up in your house, and then you pay for storage. Then you buy another work, and then you sort of put the work that you have hanging up in storage, and then you replace it with the one that you've just bought. And it's an endless sort of cycle, right? So you acquire art, pay for storage, and when you're done with it, what do you do? So if you have, very, very investment grade pieces of modern art or even contemporary art, right, that has a clear market, you could of course go to the auction houses and move it and then buy something else. But for other types of artworks, we don't really have much of a secondary market. We do have some new businesses that have come up, I think, in the last year or so. But what I've been hearing is that there just isn't enough. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's a fair assessment of our market now? And do you see any other opportunities that we have to grow things, given the situation that we are in now, where things are a little bit soft? So 2 questions: secondary market, future opportunities.
So, secondary market in Singapore. Yes, there is not much of a secondary market here, except for the fact that, of course, Sotheby's brought back their auctions to Singapore after 15 years. And then, of course, you have some small online art platforms like Art Again, for example, where you can offload some of the works in your collection. But I think this then brings us back to the point of why do we collect? Are we collecting because we only want investment value out of the works, or are we collecting because we enjoy these artworks? I think when you buy an artwork to place in your home or in your bedroom and you wake up every day, you enjoy seeing these works, that is value in itself that we all appreciate. And I'm very sure many collections in the world, not every single artwork has value in terms of investment. A lot of times people are collecting because they like art, and I think that's perfectly fine. Of course, we all want to be happy with our purchases and to know that in future we would be able to sell them. But if your focus then is buying because you want to invest or buying because you want to hold value, then your approach to collecting would change drastically, because then you would need to really do a lot of research into the art that you are collecting, making sure that you're collecting the right work from that particular artist. And there's so many other factors that contribute towards an artwork holding value, right? That is the first part of the question in terms of secondary market, right, and holding value. Second part?
Opportunities to develop the market. What do you think? Is there anything else we can do?
I would say Singapore still is considered a relatively new art market compared to the West. So I think we have opportunities for more online platforms. I think a lot of times we see now we're all buying or looking at art online on Instagram. I know many young collectors who are buying artworks off Instagram from the artist directly. So I think, yes, there's potential to grow, potential to be trading artworks, and there is room to grow in Singapore, especially because we are still relatively new compared to the West.
I like that you brought up online platforms, because that's something that, came up very strongly during COVID, right? A lot of things were moving into the online digital space. And with art particularly is this question of, can you still have that same experience, right? If you're looking at works online and not physically. So you're optimistic? You think digital platforms can continue to grow and survive?
So initially, I was not optimistic. I always felt that you do have to experience a work in person before you commit to buying it. You have to feel something from the painting before you decide you like it. But I think with everything in life, in terms of how we've changed the way that we have been purchasing things, you could buy a watch online, you could buy jewelry online. And I think art in the same way, because technology has advanced so much, you have such clear videos, you have such detailed photos of artworks, it changes the whole buying experience, and it sort of gives you an impression of what the artwork would look like in person. So I think it has changed, and there is hope for this to continue in this direction.
Thank you. Ning, what are your thoughts on the secondary market and opportunities for growth?
I think, when I visit places like Manila, Jakarta, the domestic market is so encouraging, very, very supportive. You hear stories like, some galleries sell out every day, and when the fair ends at night, they're just scrambling to change the entire hang to bring fresh works to the market. So I think for me, I hope that all of us can work together to really encourage people to not be intimidated by the art scene and to just go and look and be curious. I mean, look at the success of boutiques or affordable art fair for that matter, where, they make it fun, they make it accessible. How should I phrase this? I think it's about encouraging people to look at art not as an elitist activity. I've also read this somewhere, and I thought it was quite interesting. If one could spend $10,000 on an expensive holiday, I think you can buy some nice artworks, no? At any other time of the year. And that could be your budget. Like, people often ask me, like, how much should I put aside, right? And I say, think of what do you call this? Not a luxury, but an amount where you, whatever that amount may be, it could be 50,000, could be 5,000, whatever it is, come up with that number and then work from there. Because usually at the early days when you're buying a piece of art, it's not going to give you like X2, X5 ROI. So spend an amount that you feel comfortable with. It's an expense. Buy something that you love and just start from there. And I also get often asked, if I want to buy investment grade work, how much is this worth the amount? And then I say, on average, try and put aside at least $50,000 if that is your top, that is like your number one goal, investment quality. $50,000 you can blow it on one work, so choose carefully, or maybe you can break it up into 2 purchases. But anything below that, I think just buy what you like. Because when you're looking at someone with investment potential, they're of a certain career, they're on a certain career trajectory, or they're represented by good galleries. So you have to invest. It's like buying good quality stocks versus penny stocks, right? If you're going to go for penny stocks, then you have to buy 100 of those and pray that one of them will make it to the top. I think that baseline is very critical. I think, unfortunately, in our educational system, the art component is there's so much more work that needs to be done. More often than not, new people who come into the scene, they buy with their ears, or they follow trends, or they follow friends. Nothing wrong with that, but I think you need to put in some effort to understand what you're looking at. It's like anything else. It's like wine or watches or jewelry or film, whatever genre, whatever topic, you have to spend some time to understand and to hone your sensibilities and to be able to discern, right? So I think, if we could buy less Hermes handbags and buy more art, I think we'll be all the richer, no?
That's something I actually said in Parliament as well, that, if you can afford a Chanel handbag, you can definitely afford a piece of art, right? So why do we not then buy more art or support artists? But that's also, I think, something maybe a bit cultural in Singapore. And the reason why I'm focusing so much on money is because, again, that UBS Art Basel survey had a really terrible statistic which said that of all the markets surveyed, Singapore was the only one where buying art for the investment value and potential was the highest ranking reason as to why people bought art. And so it's great because our market saw growth, I think, where our markets everywhere else were a little bit more depressed. But that's really our reason from the people surveyed and polled. Of course, if you speak to people in the community, you hear many different reasons and motivations why people purchase art. So I do take that survey also with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but that does tell us something, right, about the country that we live in and the market that exists here. But Valerie, I mean, what do you think? So artcommune, of course, works with artists directly, and you also engage in secondary sales, so you see both sides of the spectrum. So what do you think about the state of our secondary market, and what do you see as the opportunities in the scene today, from your perspective?
I think with regard to the secondary market, in fact, we do have a healthy demand of people asking for works, secondary works. But of course, as a gallery, we are also very selective as well. And also we find that, like the crux of the matter, right, is not so much about, whether or not you could trade up your work, but whether or not your work is of a certain sort of quality or, ticks a couple of boxes before you feel that, before there's a demand for that particular work. So end of the day, it's also about, it goes down to, how do you curate your collection? How well do you choose your works? And that has to come with, like a very long-term view of acquisition. So also, I would also want to shed a little bit light on the secondary market, because right now, right, we actually have collectors coming to us wanting to flip their artwork in less than 5 years. And personally, we feel that it is a very short time frame, because in that 5 years, you're not going to achieve anything very substantially value-wise. So to give a very specific instance, right, so there is this Ling Ziping's sprawling landscape piece that sometime back in 2012 was transacted at about that 100K range. But today, right, we know from a private gallery that it has managed and is capable of transacting at that 200K range. So, which is to say that there is twice over, jump in the value, but also it took 12 years. So in that 5 years time frame, I think it's very short. That's one thing. And second thing is, I would say, do curate your collection. But having said all this, I also do want to go back to what Christine mentioned as well. End of the day, right, we don't really just think of investment as the only criteria in terms of you collecting your works. I think you have to be, as a collector, you have to be very, very honest with yourself. What is it? What is your collecting identity? What is your focus going to be like? How much of the budget are you going to portion to maybe value retentive works? And how much are you willing to, spend on just the art you simply love and enjoy? So in that sense, right, art should be serving you instead of you sort of chasing after, what is apparently branded and what is your surefire kind of value bet that you do to the market.
So are you recommending a 70-30 portfolio?
70-30.
I mean, it depends on the individual, right?
It really depends, you see, because we really meet collectors from all types of the spectrum. We meet collectors who purely want to support emerging artists, not because they want to flip it, but obviously we also meet our fair share of collectors who first right off the hook would ask us about, is this something that's investment grade?
You should write it into the invoice. Cannot sell for 5 years. Some of us would know that if we buy from some galleries, there's a clause in there that sort of, they're telling you that you're not supposed to flip it within X number of years.
So what do you think about that UBS Art Basel survey then? Because what I'm hearing from all of you is that really, when we look at art, we're not looking at investment value really. And that's what you see with your collectors. That's your impression of it as well. So when that survey result came out, were you surprised? What did you think of it?
I'm not surprised because, in as much as we in the gallery, we don't so much as go for that investment perspective, we really do meet our fair share of Singaporeans. I don't know, is it because, we are very cautious, we're just very, maybe we want to be very well researched on this thing. We want to make sure that we're not making mistakes. But part of the joy of art collecting is, you pay your tuition fee, you go into it, then you understand what is it that you like. So personally for myself, right, I really, really enjoy working with collectors, and over time, right, seeing how their collections have evolved. Some of them would probably be very focused on their buyers. They will buy something and they will focus on that. But some of them, over the course of time, unexpectedly, change course a little bit. And, it's really just only human. You change as what you do, like a human. Yeah.
Christine, what do you think?
Maybe if we can just have a show of hands in the room, for those of you who collect art, are you buying because of investment value? If you can raise your hands. Okay, so I think a lot of collectors first start collecting because they like art. I think you would only go to an art fair because you're interested. It is a lot of work to peruse all the galleries, to go through all the artworks, to speak to artists, to speak to gallerists. And if you're not passionate about the arts, you wouldn't have the energy to do all that. It really requires a lot of effort. So yes, I will say a lot of collectors collect because they are passionate. And then when you move on in life and you see other collectors who are making money from the purchase and sale of their works, and you can see track records of that, works that have been in the market before and someone bought it from auction, for example, and then 20 years later they sell it, or 15 years later they sell it, and they made like a 300% profit on that work. Then you think, oh, okay, I could be one of those people, maybe I can start collecting to invest. And at the end of the day, it is a lot of money that we're talking about. If you want to be buying to invest, we want to know that, in future I can sell it, and or my children can sell it and they will have value from the works that I've bought, right? So I would say I agree. Many Singaporeans are very cautious. They do a lot of research before they commit to buying something, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's very important to do research. I think it's important to be careful about spending too much on an artwork, and fundamentally, we all go back down to like buy what you like, but I think I would say buy what you have researched and what you're happy with eventually.
I think that's great advice. Ning, any thoughts? No? Okay, we're coming to almost the end of this session. We've got about 4 minutes left. So I want to be a bit naughty and ask you your personal view on what are the artists that you think, who are the artists rather, that you think are interesting right now, might make good buys, or maybe are a little bit underrated by the market, and you think that there's good future value? It's a question that no gallerist will ever answer, unless you know them very well and not in a public
I know what's
forum.
Val's answer, Wong Keen. Okay, I'll start first. I think for me, I've said this publicly, I've only started collecting quite recently. And for practical reasons, I'm at this time in my life focusing on women artists, just so it helps me to be a little bit more focused. Otherwise, I'll end up buying things from all over. And it's, should I say women artists from Asia or not say Asia? I think I will leave out Asia. I'm quite open. So for a tip, I would say women artists are really having their moment now. They've been very much, some of them, not all, have been overlooked in this, very male-dominated art industry. So do your research, particularly established women artists. I think that's a good sweet spot. Not so expensive yet, lots of room to grow. And if you want to see what I'm buying, you have to come to my gallery at the Culture Story. And yeah.
Okay, Valerie, any tips for anyone looking?
I would say maybe paperworks. So currently in our current market, right, in our view, right, buyers are still leaning towards like canvas works, preferably maybe because they think that it would sort of go well against time. But the truth, what we tell all of our collectors on a daily basis is that every work ages, no matter whether you like it or not. But fortunately, in this part of the region, right, we do have a very small number and very specialized number of framers and very good restorers that is able to help you to sort of cater to your concerns with regard to paper. And yeah, the potentialities of collecting paper are immense, but I just want you, end of the day, we also do hope that people go in with a little bit of that adventurous spirit as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because you always hear that the climate in Singapore is not great for paperworks, right? So, but you see value there. Any particular artists?
I mean, what I can say is that you could obtain even a blue chip artist at a very, very reasonable price. So what we do is, we do compare like maybe an artist with a suitable sort of spin in his career, his oil works, his paper works. We're in the modern art market, right? So, within the realm of paper works, you could still get very good works from artists, but it's just that, perhaps maybe not so much the flavor of the day at this point in time. I still feel that there is a long way to go.
Okay, my answer to that is invest in good frames. And just follow best practices when it comes to hanging the work. Like, don't put it under the aircon unit. Don't, face the work to direct sunlight and, your big open windows. Like, just practical tips to prolong the lifespan of the work. And eventually, 15, 20 years, you might get some foxing. Very treatable, don't worry, just call me. I'll link you up to the right conservators and get it treated. Not an issue at all.
Okay, Christine, any tips?
I would say, picking up from Ning, definitely undiscovered female artists. I think artists who were in the peers of like the surrealist artists or modern artists who were oftentimes overlooked. You could start doing some research into that. One artist in particular, I know we're at SEA Focus, which is Southeast Asian focus, but I'm just going to talk about an international artist. So an American artist called Lynn Drexler. She was a student of Robert Motherwell. And a couple of years ago, her works were selling for about 20 to 30,000 USD. And now, after being represented by her estate, being represented by White Cube, her artworks are going for 800,000, and only from a particular period of works that she created. So, and she is in the company of a very famous abstract expressionist artist. So women artists have been very much overlooked, I think especially so in the West, and it would be a good way to even look at maybe some of the artists from abstract expressionism, the modern side of it, as well as surrealist artists.
Thank you. All very good tips. Okay, that brings us to 3 o'clock, so we're at the end of our session. So I'm going to bring this panel to a close. Thank you all for these excellent comments. Thank you to the audience for staying with us throughout. And yeah, thank you. May applaud, yes. Thank you for listening. So we're going to end the panel now, but we'll be around. So if you'd like to have a chat with us, please do come and approach us. Thank you so much. And thank you, SEA Focus, for having us today.
Thank you.